Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In a comment on a recent video we did regarding identification for foreigners in Thailand, this was a discussion of driving licenses versus pink ID cards. So these are Thai ID cards. For those who are unaware, there's a Thai national ID card for Thai nationals. It's a blue card. It's an ID that Thais have. Non-Thai nationals, depending on the circumstances, but basically if they get a yellow house book, non-Thai nationals may be able to get what's called a pink ID card, which is an issued ID card by the government here in Thailand. And in some comments on some videos I did on this, I saw one thing where they were talking about, yeah, a lot of Thais sort of that you see on the street, they kind of look askance and think that the pink ID card is like fake or something. And I can see why. One is, you know, I think a lot of people, especially folks that are immigrants, expats, whatever you want to call it, that live in a foreign country, folks living in a foreign country have a very different perspective on that country from those who are native to that country. For example, I'm pretty sure that, you know, 90 to 98% of the American population does not know what an I-551 stamp is or what a green card looks like, maybe. You know, now maybe green card, what it looks like, maybe more people know than that. But, you know, people that live in a place are not overly familiar with the immigration documentation associated with it. And in the case of a pink ID card, it isn't immigration documentation per se, but it pertains only to foreigners. So if you're native-born Thai, you'd never deal with that kind of documentation, and so it would be very foreign, and you just simply would not be familiar with it. The thing to take away from this video is, one, no, it is not a fake ID. The pink ID card is a genuine ID. However, it's simply that. It's kind of interesting because when the Civil Registration Act was amended, I believe in 1991. And allowed for yellow house books, and then there were regulations promulgated that allowed for the pink ID card. You know, they were promulgated sort of pursuant to those changes, which allowed for yellow house books. It was just that. It's just ID. It's not, whereas Thai ID card is actually a million pieces of documentation all rolled into one, in a sense, and it's functional, very functional. A Thai pink ID is just an ID. And I know a lot of folks that have talked about, well, I still carry my passport, even though I have an ID, I have a driving license too. You know, my opinion is, I don't think you need that much ID to just live in Thailand. I think driving license or pink ID, I mean, it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other. That stated, it's, you know, pink IDs stem from a yellow house book. Yellow house book has some connotation to it that it basically just is what it is. It's a document that says where you live. That's really all it boils down to. Meanwhile, the driving license actually does confer the right to drive. So compared to a driving license, a pink ID does not confer the license to drive in the kingdom. But it is not a fake ID. It is a genuine ID, and it's just very unfamiliar, in my opinion, to street-level Thais that you'll just deal with. Yes, probably government folks will know what it is. Some banks, especially those banks that deal with a lot of foreign nationals, are probably going to know and be somewhat familiar with it. But for the most part, yeah, your average person on the street that's a Thai probably has never even seen a pink ID card before.